This is Joshua chapter 10. Father, please open our eyes to the Scripture. Amen. The last chapter briefly mentioned that a number of kings in the Promised Land are coming together in an alliance to defend themselves against Israel. Now we see what they're up to as we go to verse 1. Now when Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, they were afraid because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. Comment: Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, just saw his very big problem get even bigger. Not only have Joshua and Israel come in and utterly destroyed Jericho with her king, then Ai with her king, now the great and mighty Gibeonites have surrendered like puppies. Verse 1, the Gibeonites are with and among Israel, meaning in Adoni-Zedek's mind, Gibeon has added to Israel's strength. But strength of numbers isn't really where Israel's military strength comes from. Adoni-Zedek doesn't fully realize what the king of Gibeon did fully realize. Israel's unstoppable because of Yahweh. So Adoni-Zedek, in his useless strategy, is going to try to defy Yahweh. He's part of the alliance that began to organize itself against Israel in the last chapter, which we'll read more about as we go to verse 3. Therefore Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up to me and help me. Let's strike Gibeon, for they have made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Comment: there are a lot of cities in this chapter, which we'll point out in the map afterward, but for now, just realize that all the places are in the central and southern Promised Land. Adoni-Zedek is calling his allies to come up and attack Gibeon. Gibeon has joined Israel, so if they can take it, they can make Israel a little weaker, they think. Verse 5. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their armies, and encamped against Gibeon and made war against it. The men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal, saying, Don't abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the hill country have gathered together against us. Comment: the Gibeonites are calling for Israel to come up and help them quickly. It's an emergency. Verse 7. So Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and the whole army with him, including all the mighty men of valor. Yahweh said to Joshua, Don't fear them, for I have delivered them into your hands. Not a man of them will stand before you. Comment: not a man of them will stand before you. That's the extraordinary nature of Yahweh's presence with Israel, which Yahweh has reiterated many times. For example, Yahweh told Joshua in Joshua 1:5, quote, No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life, end quote. So will Joshua respond to the Gibeonites' call? Verse 9, Joshua therefore came to them suddenly. He marched from Gilgal all night. Comment: that's a 20-mile march overnight. Joshua brought the army to Gibeon, and now, speaking of Adoni-Zedek and his allies who came up to attack Gibeon, verse 10, Yahweh confused them before Israel. He killed them with a great slaughter at Gibeon and chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth-horon and struck them to Azekah and to Makkedah. Comment: the Allied troops ran from Israel in at least 2 different directions. Israel chased them as far as 18 miles south to Azekah and an unknown distance west to Makkedah. Yahweh promised in Deuteronomy 28:7 that he would cause the enemies to flee before Israel 7 ways. Verse 11. As they fled from before Israel while they were at the descent of Beth-horon, Yahweh hurled down great stones from the sky on them to Azekah, and they died. There were more who died from the hailstones than those whom the children of Israel killed with the sword. Comment: this is all Yahweh. The confusion, the fear, the great stones, the hailstones, which killed more than the sword. Yahweh told them through Moses, quote, Yahweh your God will deliver them up before you and will confuse them with a great confusion until they are destroyed. Deuteronomy 7:23. But now Yahweh is going to do something even more extraordinary. Verse 12. Then Joshua spoke to Yahweh in the day when Yahweh delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. He said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still on Gibeon. You moon, stop in the valley of Aijalon. The sun stood still and the moon stayed until the nation had avenged themselves of their enemies. Isn't this written in the book of Jasher? The sun stayed in the middle of the sky and didn't hurry to go down about a whole day. There was no day like that before it or after it that Yahweh listened to the voice of a man, for Yahweh fought for Israel. Comment, there wasn't enough time in one day to do an adequate slaughter, so Yahweh extended the day. Verse 13 says, the sun stood still. This is the same God that did creation in 6 days, so holding back the sun's small potatoes. Verse 15, Joshua returned and all Israel with him to the camp to Gilgal. Comment, the battle died down and all Israel went back to home base at Gilgal by the Jordan River. They saved Gibeon and they slaughtered quite a few of the Amorites that were attacking it, but they didn't conquer anything and they didn't find any of the kings. But now, verse 16, these 5 kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Makkedah. Joshua was told, saying, the 5 kings have been found hidden in the cave at Makkedah. Comment, most of the locations mentioned in this chapter are still well known, but the location of Makkedah is unknown. Verse 18, Joshua said, roll large stones to cover the cave's entrance and set men by it to guard them, but don't stay there. Pursue your enemies and attack them from the rear. Don't allow them to enter into their cities, for Yahweh your God has delivered them into your hand. Comment, the 5 kings are at Makkedah, and it seems some of their surviving troops are there with them. Joshua says, shut the kings up in the cave, attack the troops, and chase them down. Verse 20, when Joshua and the children of Israel had finished killing them with a very great slaughter until they were consumed, and the remnant which remained of them had entered into the fortified cities, all the people returned to the camp to Joshua at Makkedah in peace. Comment, the main camp is still at Gilgal. Makkedah is a temporary military camp. After chasing the allied troops, the men have come back to Joshua at Makkedah. Going on, none moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel. Then Joshua said, open the cave entrance and bring those 5 kings out of the cave to me. They did so and brought those 5 kings out of the cave to him, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. When they brought those kings out to Joshua, Joshua called for all the men of Israel and said to the chiefs of the men of war who went with him, come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings. They came near and put their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, don't be afraid, nor be dismayed. Be strong and courageous, for Yahweh will do this to all your enemies against whom you fight. Afterward Joshua struck them, put them to death, and hanged them on 5 trees. They were hanging on the trees until evening. At the time of the going down of the sun, Joshua commanded, and they took them down off the trees and threw them into the cave in which they had hidden themselves, and laid great stones on the mouth of the cave, which remain to this very day. Comment, during all this fighting, Israel has taken no new ground, but they've severely weakened the central and southern promised land. It's time to march from place to place for cleanup operations, starting with the place they happen to be right now. Verse 28, Joshua took Makkedah on that day and struck it with the edge of the sword, with its king. He utterly destroyed it and all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining. He did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Comment, meaning Joshua killed Makkedah's king and displayed his body on a tree until evening. Verse 29, Joshua passed from Makkedah and all Israel with him to Libnah and fought against Libnah. Yahweh delivered it also with its king into the hand of Israel. He struck it with the edge of the sword and all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining in it. He did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Joshua passed from Libnah and all Israel with him to Lachish and encamped against it and fought against it. Comment, Lachish was one of the 5 allied cities, which means their former king and many of their troops are already dead and the alliance has fallen apart. Verse 32, Yahweh delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel. He took it on the 2nd day and struck it with the edge of the sword, with all the souls who were in it, according to all that he had done to Libnah. Then Horam, king of Gezer, came up to help Lachish, and Joshua struck him and his people until he had left him no one remaining. Joshua passed from Lachish and all Israel with him to Eglon, comment another allied city going on, and they encamped against it and fought against it. They took it on that day and struck it with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed all the souls who were in it that day, according to all that he had done to Lachish. Joshua went up from Eglon and all Israel with him to Hebron, and they fought against it. Comment another allied city. Verse 37. They took it and struck it with the edge of the sword, with its king and all its cities, and all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining, according to all that he had done to Eglon, but he utterly destroyed it, and all the souls who were in it. Joshua returned and all Israel with him to Debir and fought against it. He took it with its king and all its cities. They struck them with the edge of the sword and utterly destroyed all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining. As he had done to Hebron, so he did to Debir, to its king, as he had done also to Libnah and to its king. So Joshua struck all the land, the hill country, the south, the lowland, the slopes, and all their kings. He left no one remaining, but he utterly destroyed all that breathed, as Yahweh the God of Israel commanded. Joshua struck them from Kadesh Barnea even to Gaza, and all the country of Goshen even to Gibeon. Comment, that's the southern promised land and much of the central part, all the way to the Dead Sea and the Jordan River on the east, to the Great Sea on the west, and Kadesh Barnea in the extreme south, up to Gibeon in the central highlands. As we'll find out later, this doesn't mean Israel was able to locate and annihilate all of the population or even all of the troops, but they're now dominant in those areas. Verse 42. Joshua took all these kings and their land at one time because Yahweh, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Joshua returned and all Israel with him to the camp at Gilgal. Comment, back to home base at Gilgal. Verse 42, they took all that because Yahweh fought for Israel. Joshua 11 is next at land of Havilah.net. Joshua 11. Until then, don't be afraid and don't be dismayed. This is the map of Joshua 10. The Dead Sea's 10 miles across. The king of Jerusalem told the kings of Jarmuth, Lachish, Eglon, and Hebron to come up and help him strike Gibeon for making peace with Israel. Israel marched all night from the camp at Gilgal to surprise the allied kings at Gibeon. Joshua slaughtered them, chased them by the way of Beth Horon, and struck them to Azekah and Makkedah, which is unknown location. From Beth Horon to Azekah, Yahweh threw down great stones, hailstones on them, killing more than Israel did by the sword. Joshua said, "Sun, stand still on Gibeon, you moon, stop in the valley of Ajalon." Joshua then took Libnah, unknown location, then cleaned out Lachish, which was one of the towns of the allied kings. The king of Gezer came to help Lachish, and Joshua wiped him out. Then Joshua finished off Eglon, also in the alliance. Then went to Hebron, another alliance town, finished it off. Then to Debir, another alliance town, unknown location, and finished it. He struck as far as Kadesh Barnea, which is in the extreme south in the desert, Gaza, which is on the coastal plain, and Goshen, location unknown.